That was Dust Hat with Ain't Nothing But a House Party. And you're listening to Northern Remedy here on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from New Haven, Connecticut. This is the show dedicated to New Haven's music, past, present, and future. I'm Brian Slattery. I'm the host of this show. I'm the arts editor of the New Haven Independent. And with me here today is arts reporter Karen Ponzio, who reports on, I think, more shows than I do. So, so it's nice to see you here, Karen.
Thank you for having me, Brian. This is exciting.
Oh, absolutely. So what we're doing today is, so last year we did a roundup of like our favorites. Not, I mean, our favorite shows of the year, but there were various reasons why. So it's not like it's like not necessarily the favorite band. Now this is not necessarily, because it's our favorite kind of music. It's something about the show that stuck in our brains as being particularly cool. And we had such a long list last year that we decided it would be good to do a mid-year version of this. So this would be our favorite shows of 2018 so far.
Yes. Thus far.
Yes, exactly. So, here we are, and we started with Dust Hat because of a show that Karen went to. This would be in January, right?
Yes, it was the first show I reported on this year.
So you started off strong.
Oh, yeah. Well,
tell us about the show.
Yeah, so it was the Irascibles, which was I interviewed Tim Parrish, who, just briefly, the article was about how this band doesn't play together that often, and they were all kind of coming together because like worlds collided with a wedding and people being
they live like all over the country.
Well, yeah,
right?
there was one of them lives in Australia.
There.
So, but they all like met in
our
Georgia.
51st state, apparently, according to me. Yeah,
so it all kind of like
perfect.
melded together, and they were doing the show, and they opened for Dust Hat. But man, this show was a party, and I mean, Dust Hat's a real party band anyway. They're kind of getting
that's sort of their MO
to be that. I also
right?
just recently did my last article, or one of my last articles I've done was an interview with Brendan Toller of
right.
Dust Hat,
right.
and they just came out with a new song. They're coming out with a new vinyl. EP,
right?
And and I went to his Shake and Vibrate, which took over for Kid Congo.
Yes,
so
exactly.
it's like kind of this is like one of those things where it's like the first thing I did and kind of the last thing I did too. But yeah, that show was
it's just a real sense of closure in this show.
Yeah, we just already went full circle. We can stop right now, Brian. Basically done.
It's been fun. Thanks for being on the show.
It's
Karen.
been great. But yeah, the thing about that show, not just that it was the first show of the year, but that, man, talk about, which is one of the things we talked about last year with favorite shows and favorite moments was the community. And man, people came out
right.
to see these guys because they were friends with them. I mean, Tim teaches at Southern, so he has a huge community of people.
He's a creative writing professor there? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And he's just a real popular guy, and he's a fun, great guy, and man, what a show they put on. And I mean, people were like, what? These guys don't play together all the time and rehearse, and
right.
It was so much fun. I mean, again, not to like pump what I do, but go back and watch those videos. I mean, you watch them and you're like, I want to go see these guys. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, right.
So, and then Dust Hat again is also really fun. So it was a great moment in New Haven for just people coming out and being supportive of somebody
right.
they love.
Which is a theme we're probably going to return to again and again in some way or another.
It's really happening a lot. That was also right after this. It was like that bomb cyclone and one of the storms. It was
right.
Yeah, because one of the guys announced that too. It was another one of those. A lot of the shows I went to, there was another theme with that where like the day after or a couple days after this really crazy weather event, and people were just like let out of their cages or like glad to be alive kind of thing. It was really interesting. That's happened a lot this year.
I agree. Like, it sounds like a cliche that would be a thing that you would notice, but it kind of is true. I agree with you that after something like that, people are sort of more in a mood to have a good time.
Yeah, when I looked through the shows, it was definitively the shows that I picked were right after something that was like, wow, it's almost like this post-apocalyptic kind of.
People party just a little bit harder.
Exactly.
Yes. No, that's a good one. So do you have it? Let's just keep rolling because we have a long
We have
we have a long list.
my list. I've already, yeah. I when I last counted, which wasn't in the past month, I was already at what, like 150 acts I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Done like 80 shows, probably almost 90 by now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been out a lot. I've been having a,
We've been out a lot. We're both very tired.
We're really.
how it
I was
goes.
like, wow, no, I was going, wow, no wonder I'm so tired
Yes.
all the time. Sleep
Well,
is.
let's do this. As long as we're keeping it local for now, which would be a good sort of theme to go with. One of my favorite shows that was early in the year, is this band called Tiny Ocean, which doesn't perform a lot. And
No.
like you're describing with the Irascibles, they don't sound like they don't perform a lot. If I had to guess, they practice a lot,
Right.
and then they just don't perform very often. But this is a band that has like really strong material and a really strong front person in the form of Kirsten. I suddenly can't remember her last name, but we'll look it up. But she writes all the material. She's a really good singer, and she's assembled like a really good band for her songs. And this is a band that I saw in the fall of last year and thought like, wow, they're really good. And I wished I had brought my reporting gear
Right,
so that I
right,
could
right.
write something up quickly. And then spent months looking for them to be performing again, and finally sort of found them like some sort of like the ivory-billed woodpecker.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So I put it on my calendar and off I went. And they were performing at Stella Blues, and they there was like there was a decent sized crowd for them. And I wondered whether I would still have the same impression that I had the first time. And lo and behold, I did. I listened to that band going like, wow, they really have something. This is a really cool band. And in some ways that made it sort of one of my favorite shows because of that sort of hunt. I think part of being a music fan, and it's really more like just any music fan, I think, whether you play music or not, being a music fan, part of what's fun about being a music fan is finding new things and sort of looking for
Yes.
new things in this,
Oh, yeah.
like the way, like I don't collect records, but I get why people collect records.
Right.
I sort of collect live shows in the same way, where I'm sort of looking
Well-
for the next cool experience to have.
It's what we do.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
so this show made it onto this memorable show list because of that. Because there was a bit of a hunt, and then I was so well rewarded. It's like, all right, this is
Again,
a great
the circle complete. Well, I saw them. They did one of the Sunday Buzz shows probably last year, and then they did one of the Mercy Choir
Right,
residency
right.
shows.
You should stay closer to the mic so that your voice
So
is
yeah, okay,
so
sorry.
nice.
So
There you
yeah,
are.
so I think those were the 2 times that I've seen them.
Yes.
And yeah, no, I agree with you. Kirsten's just really, they're really good. So
Yeah. So Tiny Ocean, you should perform more often.
come back, come back,
Exactly.
Tiny Ocean.
So that's sort of it's almost the opposite of the community line, and it's more like the hunting down part.
Well, not, and there's also that issue of when people talk about like local acts, like do they play too much? Do they not play enough? I mean, what
Yeah.
is too much and what is enough? I mean, that's so subjective.
Yes. For sure.
In my mind, again, I'm going to say it for the first time and probably not the last. Not a musician, so I'm not, playing gigs, and I can't talk in that sense. But I don't know what is appropriate or not appropriate. And if it's somebody that you really want to see, and they play in the area twice a year,
Right.
somebody you really want to see, and they play once a month,
Yes.
it's somebody you want to see. Like I'm not really clear on those parameters. Like some people are like, you shouldn't play,
Right.
you should do this. So
Right. So tilt the mic toward you,
toward me,
and then you'll be
like
even-
that.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, hey,
So much better.
hey, New Haven.
Oh man, so much better. There we go.
That good?
Our tiny technical difficulties have been resolved.
Hey, I'm doing my best. I have my own setup home for my own.
No, totally.
Whatever you want me to do,
So,
Brian.
the question of what to whether it's okay to play super frequently or infrequently and what that means applies very well to one of your favorite shows, which would be Rhino.
Oh. Also, this is a good segue
because
in
this came up in the interview you did with them.
This came up in the interview with them, and also related to what you just said about finding somebody and then kind of waiting. So I did not include this in the article. Okay, so I wrote about Rhino. I had done an interview with them a few months ago, and the interview never ended up in, but then they had their album release, and so it was a combined interview, album release, show, extravaganza. I found them early last year, when I had met Freddie, who was drumming for another band, and was like, you have to come to my show. You have to come to my show. And I went to the show. I'm like, I can't report on it. I'm good for the week. I already had my assignments.
Yeah.
And I went and I just casually took a video and put it on Facebook, and people were like messaging me or like posting like, who are these guys? These guys are amazing.
Yes. Nice.
And I ended up, following them. And I wrote about them once. They closed for a 4 or 5 band show at Stella Blues one night. And it was like, they played it like after 12, and there were like a handful of people there, and they still played great. And I've seen them all through, but man, 3 Sheets, that album release show, 3 Sheets is their place, and they play everywhere. They are not playing as often as they used to. But they were playing a lot, and people were going to see them. I mean, I didn't go to every show, but there were always videos up, and there were always people talking about them.
And do they play around the state?
They play
also,
around the state. I think it's more when people are saying, when they talk about playing a lot, they were playing everywhere. I mean, they were playing New London, they were playing Waterbury, they were playing Bridgeport. It wasn't like they were just playing in New Haven.
Right.
But that being said, they pull people in, and man, you go to that show, and they live up to the hype. They absolutely live up to the hype. You have a great time, and their album is great. And the reason they spent the long time on the album was because they wanted it to sound a certain way. Here are people who've just seen them live,
right?
So when you go to a recording, how is that going to be? How is it going to be produced? What's it going to? And man, that record that's my favorite record of the year so far. I will say that there's been some really good stuff coming out, and that is probably the show and the record of the year so far for me.
Awesome.
I think I can commit to that.
That's your number one.
It was just it's rock and roll, man. It is just, and he's a great front man, and the music's tight. And they look like they're having a good time, and everybody at the show has a good time. Again, watch the videos. It's insanity. It's beautiful.
So I feel like this would be a good time for people to hear both of these bands because I happen to have things of them. Perfect. Should we do Rhino first and then Tiny Ocean next?
Sure.
Okay. So I've picked Drowning because that's I have this thing where it's like, well, it's the first song on the album. It's probably like the one that
It's the one that if you listen to it,
they might want to have played if you were gonna play.
You listen to it, you'll want to hear more. Trust me.
All right, awesome. So this is Rhino with Drowning, and then the next song is going to be Tiny Ocean with Americans.
And that was Tiny Ocean with Americans. And you're listening to Northern Remedy, the show dedicated to New Haven's music, past, present, and future, here on WNHHLP 103.5 FM. I'm Brian Slattery. I'm your host. And with me here is Karen Ponzio,
hey,
fellow arts reporter.
Yes.
And the two of us run around town, going to as many shows as we can.
Exactly. That's exactly what we do.
Yes.
Run.
Yes.
Stop and run again.
Yes. So we're talking about the shows that left an impression on us since January. I'm going to cheat just a little bit, maybe, but basically
yes,
since
you
January.
Are.
No, just a little,
just a tad.
But so we talked a little bit about these sort of like great kind of shows that were just super local, like New Haven bands and then New Haven fans coming out to see them. But, you know, New Haven is actually one of the things that I've found to be really great about living here, both as a reporter and as a music fan, is the way that New Haven really is pretty connected to a lot of stuff outside of New Haven. You know, people, bands passing through and that sort of thing, and the way that those two things combine. And one of the ways that they combine is this ongoing monthly concert series called So Far, which we've written about a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is organized by a musician in town called Paul Bryant Hudson, who is a really terrific soul singer and songwriter and keyboard player.
Yes.
In his own right. But this would be a good time to tell Paul Bryant Hudson to please finish the album he is reportedly working on. But until then we'll honor him.
We're not harassing you, Paul. We just really want to. He has a song on SoundCloud. When I last saw him, he's like, I have one song on SoundCloud, but I don't have any recordings or anything. And I'm like, I need to not say it again because I don't want to sound like I'm just badgering the guy.
I think he gets badgered by more than a couple people.
He's great though.
Because he's a great live performer. And it makes you want to own the things that he's doing. But as an organizer of this series and quite a bit by extension, like a community organizer, he is just as effective.
Mm-hmm.
And so far's shtick is, how would you? I'm gonna let you have a swing at how So Far's shtick works. Like,
okay, so that was another show I went to in January.
Yes.
So started the year. So you sign up for it. They send you an email and tell you where that you're signed up. You say you want to go. They send you an email, say, okay, you can come. We'll send you an email and tell you where it's going to be.
And it's like the day before.
That day.
Right?
And it's like the day before that day, they send you the email telling you where it's going to be. So this is worldwide. So this particular one is So Far New Haven.
Yes.
So that's the one that Paul is in charge of. So you get the email, you go to this place, and you don't know who's going to be performing.
Yes.
So when you walk in and sit down, they tell you who's performing. And I happened to go in January.
And sometimes it's local bands, and sometimes it's a mixture.
Correct. That's right. That's right.
Who I saw apparently has a sort of tour thing going on.
Right. Right.
Like I've been to one where the opener was local, and then two of the bands were touring bands.
Right. It started last year, right? And you went. That's where you were introduced to it. Was you went
right.
Like to the first one.
Yes.
And I think I went to one. It was like almost a year, or they were coming up on their year anniversary when I went to the one in January.
Yes.
And so Paul was there, and then that's where I saw Manny James for the first time, and that's where I saw Grit Stephen King, who I had seen performing with. And in the house band, there were also performers who I had seen with Fat Astronaut, and Lady Liz, and that. So I knew some of them, but I didn't know Paul, and I didn't know Manny. And then Paul performed alone, Manny performed alone. They performed together. It was just, oh my God, it was so good. And then from there, Manny, that was my gateway into Manny's whole thing, because and Paul, because I've seen them both twice since then.
Yeah. So you tell me about your feelings about Manny James, because I interviewed him not that long ago.
Right. And I did an article on him. I went to see him
So I know my feelings about him.
Yeah. You know my feelings about him too, but let me tell everyone else.
Yes.
Well, I did do an article on him. He performs at the Anchor Spa, and I did go see him there and reported on me. And I went to just see him on my own time, for lack of a better way to put it.
Now, for what it's worth, like that's part of the reason why this show is fun to do is because Manny performs at least once a month. At least. Yes,
the Anchor Spa he was doing like every other week.
Right.
And I think now he's doing it on Saturdays. Like it was a Saturday, then it was a Thursday, now it's a Saturday again. If you look up, you can find out. And he's very good on social media about saying this is what I'm doing and when I'm doing it.
But he does the thing where he just tells you like the day before.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So those of you who may be intrigued by this guy they were talking about, who is an R&B singer, he's very easy to follow, but you also sort of have to be prepared to go, oh, that's what I'm doing tomorrow.
Right.
Which is kind of
but
great.
here's what I'm going to say about that.
Yeah.
He's the type of performer that you want to do that.
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't like to get, I try not to get into like the superlatives and the hyperbole and all that, but then part of me is also still like this, like, very enthusiastic fan of music. And he's one of those people that you listen to him, and whether he has his original recordings and you can hear him sing anything from Smokey Robinson to Michael Jackson to Luther Vandross, and he just kills it every time. I mean, he doesn't, I know some people are like, oh, somebody's playing covers, and it's like, he plays covers of these he sings these covers of these fantastic songs, and you hear them and you're like, yes.
Yeah.
It's just, and that's my big thing is the yes. One after the other. There's no, it's, for the cliche of all killer, no filler, every song he sings is fantastic. He's a star. I feel
he
like
has songs of his own, of course.
And that's what I'm saying. So it's like,
that blend in quite seamlessly with what he's doing.
It really is. I really enjoy his music. I've listened to his music. He does have recordings on like Spotify.
Yes, he does.
And they are phenomenal.
Yeah.
A phenomenal singer and songwriter.
Right.
But yeah, and then you can bring Smokey into it, and you're like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I think that I actually think that the thing about like there being a bit of a stigma about cover bands is something that's pretty unique to rock and roll, and pretty unique to rock and roll now. Like there was a point, as we all know, like in the 60s, all those famous bands covered each other all the time.
Right.
There's like famously Jimi Hendrix would perform the hit song from another band like within the week that it was
right.
that it was out on the radio.
Yeah.
He would learn it and play it, as part of his own set. And I think that like that used to be much more common, and I think is still more common like in other genres. Like I think in R&B it's way more common to cover songs that you like just because they're good. Like why not cover them?
There's also
like Al Green has made his career of covering things,
Exactly. And I mean the other thing is, if you talk about when this is just not just R&B, rock and roll, every whether it's just a dude with a guitar somewhere, if you're doing a 3-hour set or 2 1.5 hour sets at a restaurant or a wine bar or wherever you are, you're not doing 3 hours of originals that I know of, anybody I've seen. You're doing you're mixing originals and covers.
Right.
I think some of the things that the whisperings and louder than whisperings that I hear about the covering is they talk about like, cover bands who just do nothing but covers, and again, second time, not being a musician, it's not something that I'm thinking about or concerned about.
Yeah, me neither,
in the sense
actually.
of, because I'm not, obviously I'm not losing time on stage for it.
Right.
So that's another whole issue that I want to get into. But
as a musician, I always think like the people that sort of denigrate those bands, I just think like, well, the right cover band hasn't come along for you yet.
Maybe.
Like there are certain artists that like there's someone who do I want to be in like a Beatles cover band? Like probably not. I think there are people who do that better. But if someone was like, hey, would you like to be in a Tom Waits cover band? I'd be like, yes. No problem.
Hey. And bottom line, you got to have a good time, and it's got to be what you want to hear.
Yes.
So if that's not what you want to hear, then you don't go to it. If it's what you want to hear. And I don't know if I've ever, with all the shows I've go to, I haven't kept track of it, but usually even in an hour set, somebody's covering something.
Yes.
I mean, one of the other bands that I picked as one of my shows of the year also broke out and did these covers, and I was like, oh, I think I texted you during the show and was like, oh my God, they're covering,
yes.
They're covering Bill Withers. I can't take it. It was beautiful.
So to get back to Manny though, like he's like a room worker, which is part of what makes
he's an entertainer.
Yes. Yes. So you should describe that for us.
Very charismatic. It was him and Pete Greco at the front of the Anchor Spa there and doing their thing, and then he walked around to the back and he sang happy birthday and he engaged people and had them sing with him, and it was seamless and just again charismatic, and he it didn't break at all in his performance or singing, and it's just endearing and just
and people sing and clap along.
Oh, people
with very little provocation.
He really did bring, it's not like it's this huge place. It kind of goes deep, but it's not huge. Right. And he just brought everybody in. And I think we saw him one night where the place was packed. And then I saw him one night where the place wasn't necessarily packed, but, people were engaged by him, and he went in back and got the people in back engaged. I mean, he worked the room. There was no... you see that sometimes where some performers get frustrated and they're visibly frustrated. And I can understand that too.
Right.
But he's just, he takes you right with him. And again, that I got introduced to him at So Far. So at So Far, he was, the crowd was incredibly engaged, and, it was a large crowd, but it felt like the nature of those shows. That was the only one I went to of So Far. I mean, you've been to other ones too. But my feeling is the nature of those shows, that even if it's crowded, it's very intimate.
Yes. Well, they have these rules at the beginning about how you have to be quiet. You're here to listen. You're not here to hang out and talk with your friends and all that sort of stuff.
But they want you to dance, and they want you to be engaged.
Yes.
So it's more of like you're being cordial.
Yeah.
But it's also lays the groundwork for just having a really good time.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like a buzzkill.
Oh no, not at all.
It's not that. It's more like they're just saying hey, pay attention.
But it's the respect of the room, and that's another thing you hear from people of are you somewhere where people in the back, people are at a bar.
Yeah.
Like these are not at bars.
Right.
And you're at a bar and there's performers on, and there's this group of people watching the performers, and there's a group of people in the back at the bar just woo, doing their bar thing.
Right. And that's fine too.
And that's their thing, but these places don't have that.
Right.
The people are there for this show. They're not there to pick out what they're doing. So they came for that. And I mean, I had agree. I haven't been able to make it to another one just because it hasn't worked out, but that was the one I went to was fantastic. And again, it introduced me to 3 performers that are just phenomenal. And I've seen Manny twice since, and I've seen Paul twice since, and great every time. Highly recommended.
Yes. So my own one of my most memorable shows was also from a So Far show, and it was a singer and songwriter named Denise Renee, who is also here in New Haven but does not perform very much. And I guess it's the same idea. Now I am looking for the next time to see her. The way that I did with Tiny Ocean before.
This whole show is just basically Brian trying to get people to perform again.
I know. Everybody.
FYI.
Everybody.
Hello.
I want to see you again.
Self-serving.
Yeah.
Self-serving.
But it was like that. I mean, the thing that, again, the thing that's fun about it is the whole, I had no idea who she was. And then, so she is a gospel singer and has been doing it for a long time. And she did a solo performance with just her voice and one of those looper sort of machines, which of course are getting better and better. And I think that for a little, I think the first time I saw someone use one of those things, it felt slightly gimmicky and also glitchy. And then that made it, that made it somewhat distracting. But those machines have gotten a lot better, and
Right.
people have also figured out how to use them in increasingly creative ways. And she is one of them, where, very quickly she managed to like produce a background for herself to then do what she wanted to do as a singer, which is a lot. She's a really talented and versatile and really effective singer, like serious range, serious ability to project. She probably needed the microphone only because she wanted to run her voice through certain effects when she wanted to. Like she has the sort of voice where she could have filled the room easily without the microphone. But was was doing really cool things with her voice because she could manipulate it on the spot. And I mean, that's the sort of thing that strikes me as very difficult to do. Like she probably had to sit around and practice that for
Right.
quite a while, like learning how to do her job as a singer, and also sort of have this like producer head on,
Right.
At the same time, to make sure that everything sounded like it was supposed to. But it was all like really polished and really put together. And I sat there going like, how is it that I've been doing my job for 3 years and haven't heard this person yet? And I felt like a failure.
I'm sorry.
In that
I'm
sense.
sorry, New Haven. I
Like,
let you down.
Oh my God! How
again.
Yeah, because I'm sure she must perform. There's no way that she just
Right.
There's no way that she performs only like a couple times a year. I mean, but whatever she's doing,
Right.
it's great. And it was another one of those great like revelatory moments. And the reason you go out to hear live music, to hear
Right.
something you won't get to hear otherwise.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's our good. We did like a little so far segment.
But well, you know what? Again, not trying not to fall into like the best, the greatest, the this and that. But man, that is a series that, and when I've seen like
It
little
has a lot of energy attached
clips
to it.
of ones I haven't gone to, you know what I mean? It's like, like that you're pretty much guaranteed that they're built for that, to just have a really good time and really the whole idea of it is to promote who's their community, to promote this space of good music.
And to bring it back to the community line that runs through all of this, like for that a series, as far as I can tell, seems to have caught on pretty nicely.
It's all over the world. I mean, it's not even this thing.
And that here, like people keep coming to the shows.
People keep coming to them. Yeah.
Like I've been to a few of them, and they've always had like a really healthy, engaged crowd attached to them.
Oh, the night I went was
super cool.
was crowded, and but it was crowded in like a good way. It wasn't a crowded.
Yes.
It wasn't uncomfortable at all. It was just like hanging out at somebody's party.
Right. Yeah, I know it hits a pretty sweet spot.
Beautiful.
So there we've got our little so far segment.
Thanks,
and you
so far.
should hear these two people.
Oh.
So we're gonna start with Denise Renee, who is the only recording that I can find of her is her doing the Lord's Prayer.
And he's
good.
Looked. Trust us, he's looked.
I did. And then the next one I will play is Manny James with Dear America.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yes.
Yep.
That was Manny James with Dear America. And before that was Denise Renee with The Lord's Prayer. And you're listening to Northern Remedy here on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from New Haven, Connecticut. This is the show dedicated to New Haven's music, past, present, and future. And with me here in the studio is Karen Ponzio, fellow arts reporter, and we're doing a little recap of our shows that have stuck in our brains since January. So January to now.
This brain.
Yeah. And the idea is that we did this last year for the whole year, and we just had too many shows to talk about. So we figured we'd split it up into two shows.
I nudged Brian right into it. I'm like, let's do a half-year one.
It was so hard to convince me, too.
It was brutal.
I was so resistant. I was so resistant. But here we are. So let's see. Let's do a little recap. We've talked about a couple of like straight up local shows that have stood out for us. We've talked about So Far, which is a concert series that has a pretty neat mix of local and non-local acts. And that's a good segue to be talking about another sort of set of the another aspect, I guess, of the New Haven music scene, which is that there's a sort of handful of promoters in town who are getting increasingly good at bringing international acts to New Haven, and those shows are finding a pretty healthy audience. A healthy and enthusiastic audience.
Oh yeah.
Which is, I think, just as important a part of the equation. As I think that those promoters have figured out that there are a whole bunch of people who are interested in hearing music from pretty far away. Those shows have kind of increased in frequency, and that is cool. So, let's start by Karen. Why don't you tell us about Earth Cry?
Okay, so Earth Cry was in February, and that was another one of those ones that was like the day after a storm type of thing.
Another day after storm.
And they're from Jamaica, and they were like, it's really, they were starting this tour, this massive tour, and they're talking about winter being tough for them because winter where they live is still summer. So they were joking drier. About it.
Just a little drier. That's all.
A little bit, right? But man, reggae, I think they describe themselves as like reggae roots rock.
Yeah,
and
which is accurate.
Yeah, and I had never heard them before. And they just, I think they played like a 15 or 16 song set.
Now, did they have an opener or did they just play?
Oh, no, that was, yes, the opener was Ben McCullough from the Alpaca Gnomes.
Oh yeah, right on. That's
and
right.
with two members of the Alpaca Gnomes.
Yeah.
The trio. I believe it was the trio. If it wasn't the trio, it was at least him and two. I've seen them since then, and they have different like levels of the full band, the trio, sometimes not the trio.
Right.
And so people were there to see them. Who are big fans of them, followed them. People were, you're writing on the show. They're so great. People were talking. They wear the gnome hats and a lot of fun. And that was a great set too. A lot of fun. And then this band comes on, and they are just, it was like this melding of like Prince and reggae, and they were just these fantastic musicians, and that beat, and people were dancing, and then again, I mentioned it when we were talking before, they go into like Bill Withers.
Yeah, nice.
And they play, Ain't No Sunshine, and I'm like, that's what I texted you. I'm like, they're playing Bill Withers. It was like I lost, like I had to put everything down and like compose myself because I was just like, I can't, through my camera, through my notebook, which I've been doing. It took me a year into this job to finally just be like, screw. Oh, sorry.
I think we're allowed to say.
Yeah. So, but I mean, we've talked about this. Yeah. I'm doing very good. I think I'm behaving.
Now is a good time to point out how difficult it is not to swear on the radio. There's a big filter that we all have to put up when we're doing this.
Yeah, it hasn't been. I'm getting better at it, even though on my radio show that I do, it's online, so I could say whatever I want. And but I still, for whatever reason, I just don't, and I don't know why.
Yeah,
I think because it's just
a whole other medium.
In essence, as casual as this is, it's still professional. So I just have a different air about me. I don't know. Haha. Right.
But so you threw down your.
I had. I threw down. Yes, I had to stop because it was just, there are these shows where you just get carried away, and I will say that that show, and then that's one of my favorite shows of the year, specifically because of that, because it just was one of those times that you just, even if you don't know the band, the music and the vibe just takes you in, and you go with it.
Yes.
Because and you write about that. Like one of the things people say to me all the time is they're like, when I read your articles, it makes me wish I was at the show.
Yeah.
Like you're so enthusiastic, and I go yes, and I tell you because that's my job. Get people to come to New Haven, and even though the show already happened, I think I'm glad that the enthusiasm carries through, that they could see that there are people that aren't just sitting there going, well, you know what was wrong with this? I have no interest in talking about what was wrong with it. I couldn't tell you what was wrong with that show. I don't know if I could tell you what was wrong with a lot of the shows I go to, because I'm there to enjoy myself and to give that to other people. This show was one of those. Like if they came back, I would be there in a heartbeat, and I would be telling people, you need to go to this show if you want to have a good time and dance and
right on.
hang out. And they were lovely. It was just lovely. Like lovely is just a word I can think for it.
Yeah.
It felt like summer.
Cool.
It felt like summer in February, which is
always
pretty
nice.
damn good.
Right.
Not a bad deal for a Tuesday
nice.
night in New Haven.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
And then Madhu Mokhtar, which we talked about last year, is another one of those that just.
So actually, this is a good segue to where we are going. But so I didn't go to his second show. So that they were, how far apart were those? Were they?
Madhu Mokhtar
like
was
not
I know
quite a
last year
year.
was the week of my birthday. It was 2 days after my birthday, because that was one of my birthday week shows that
So
I just
they're
went
not
to.
quite a year apart. Not even.
I just went to that to go to it, and you too. We didn't work that. That was one of the first shows you and I were at that people were, a couple people asked if we were working, and we weren't, and we just.
So the second time he went, was it as crowded as the first time?
It was sold out. So
Nice.
here's what happened. It
There
was
you
in
go.
May, and I didn't get a ticket because I just wasn't sure if I was working and doing something else, and it sold out. And then a friend messaged me and said, I have an extra ticket. Would you like to go? And I wasn't working that night, and I went. So I happened to get to that again, didn't report on it, wasn't planning on going to it because it sold out. And it's at Lyric Hall, again, which is where they were last time. And they're just.
Yeah, it's
like
a great
these
band.
guys, and to see that they came back again in less
And
than
that
a
they
year,
got- and
and
that
they
they got
sold
a
out
big following
again,
again.
and you go, and it's just like you throw. And I wasn't reporting on it again, so I was able just to leave my stuff down and not be concerned with photos and notes and things like that. And it creates this trance almost, like you are taken in by this guitar playing and drumming, and it just builds. Like it starts and you're like, this is really good, and then it just keeps going, and you're like, you just don't. It feels like it almost takes you like in an out of body experience.
Yeah.
Like this is what drugs without drugs is. I don't know. I don't know any other way to describe it.
Yeah.
It's just this out of body. It's another experience that takes you like out of yourself. You're not thinking about. I'm not at least thinking about chords and lyrics. It's just that love, that pulsing, chanting, awesome vibe.
Yes.
And it's
For
the
sure.
room. It's the whole room. It's not me. I know it's not me, because everybody leaves there and they're like, oh my God.
Yes.
Oh
Well,
my
I
God.
always, I mean, as a musician, my whole thing is that I see, like, this has been true of every good African band I've seen, regardless of which part of Africa they're from. But I see them, and as a musician, there's a brief moment where I think to myself, like, why am I bothering? These bands are so good. I could just go from one to the other and like never play myself, and I'd be delighted. It's like, why am I
Go back to my car and smash all my instruments.
yeah, like, I mean, and like
know.
with real gratitude also. It's like, just get rid of those things and just go listen to other people who are like way better than you. That's
Like
mean,
when I
it
read a
is.
book and I want to go rip up every poem I ever wrote.
Yeah, you can wipe
Pretty
out.
much.
Wipe out.
I got you.
Yeah. I mean, but it's true. There's something very cool about the way music is put together. The way those bands put music together. That's very, very mesmerizing. And as a music fan, that's kind of what I'm there for. I'm also there to be taken away.
And I do, and I like
Which is
that.
not the same as escapism. I'm not.
No,
it's not. That.
It's not, and that's
But
why
it's-
I was leery to make the drug reference.
Yeah.
But because I don't want to be like, oh, I'm escaping from anything. If anything, it draws you in.
Yes.
And it
I think
becomes like this
it's-
group experience as
Yes.
opposed to an individual experience. Because
Right.
to me, drugs are like, from what I've heard, drugs are an individual experience. But the
Yeah.
group experience of this music, it's like that. And most of the shows that you will see that I will say are my favorite or things I will recommend are the ones that create community, not just in bringing people there in the beginning, but keeping people and drawing them in and having this like unified, because that's even what the Rhino show is like. And Rhino is absolutely local music.
Right.
But it's like
Right.
this one big pulsing organism of people. He can put himself in the crowd and he can walk on the ceiling and he doesn't have to worry about them dropping him.
Yes.
So you have that physicality, but then with something like Madhu Mokhtar, it's something like almost like the air changes.
Yeah.
And it's when you talk vibe, it's the actual energetic vibe of the room changes. Everybody becomes on the same level of this wavelength.
Yes.
Yeah, Earth Cry was like that. Madhu Mokhtar, I would, that's one of those ones almost now. Like, I think if they come back again, I'm just going to buy a ticket.
Just buy a ticket.
I'm just
already.
buying a ticket. And if I don't use it, I'm going to just hand it to somebody and say, you don't go to shows in New Haven here, you can have this one.
Right.
If I have to work and I can't do it.
Yeah.
I think that's where I am with them.
This is a good way to go about as current as we can get, I suppose, with a band I saw on Friday.
Right. Nice.
And it's similar. It's like this is a Malian musician named Sheikh Hamala Diabate, and so Diabate is a if for people who follow music from Mali, the last name is immediately recognizable, and the biggest reason for that is because it's a family of griot who are like, it's a tradition of storytelling and singing that stretches back a long way, like a really long way, like over 1,000 years. So
amazing.
in this case, he was, as far as I could tell, he was backed by a friend who plays guitar who is American and who has been, they've been playing together for a long time. And then a group of like very excited musicians to be playing with somebody like that. So it was a really good band. They were
like you would have been if you were playing.
Exactly.
Big
there was a
smile.
There was the guy had a violin player in his band, and I just thought like that guy is psyched, and I would be psyched to be in his shoes.
Right.
So in any case, he was really good. I mean, for exactly all of the same reasons. We did. I don't need to like give my version of what you just said, but the one thing that's cool about it is the way that they're connected is that it's partially the same group of people who are bringing these bands in, which is a good way to talk about the opening of the State House, on State Street, and this is spearheaded by Carlos Wells,
right?
And
who I wrote about.
Yes, and you should
Right.
tell us a little bit about that.
A little bit. So,
Yes.
okay, so I did an interview with Carlos Wells, who
Right.
has been at Firehouse 12 for a long time and
Yeah.
has booked, safety meeting records and booked shows through New Haven for a long, long time. Great guy. So him and Slate Ballard from The Grove. Now, The Grove is where you saw your show.
Right.
So what happened is the State House is opening soon.
Yes.
They're working on it. They started booking acts, and they're having them at the Grove, which is where Brian saw the show we just talked about.
Right.
Friday night.
Mhm.
So until the State House is open, the shows will be at the Grove, which is Slate's a place that Slate owns currently.
Right.
So this
And
building.
we're talking about like it's like a couple months of
yeah,
overlap
they're
there.
going to be it
Right.
shortly. So.
Yeah.
But the idea of the State House is, and if you read the article or want to go back and find the article, Carlos talks about at length trying to bring in these acts from all over the world.
Right.
So, but also having local acts, it's having another venue, another opportunity for people to see these acts together as well.
Right.
You know, so maybe a local act opening for a world act, and so on and so forth. And they can have like 300, like between 300 and 400 people, depending on how big the stage is. They may have no stage. They may have a stage. It's like one of those modular stages.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and the plans, if you look ahead, is to have, you know, this is but a taste of what they're planning.
Yeah.
You know,
the shows that they have announced already are like a pretty interesting combination of local acts and national level touring acts and international acts.
Right, and they're also going to be doing talks there and presentations.
Right.
One of the really interesting acts they have booked is Thomas Dolby,
right,
who people know from the 80s with, you know, She Blinded Me with... If anybody
Yes.
usually knows him, they know that.
Right.
He's done way more than that, obviously.
Right.
But for this particular show, he's going to have a projector up, and you're going to see how he creates the music. So it's a show, but it's also instructional. And apparently Los said that he has been involved in TED Talks too. So it's like it's just another level, you know, of
right.
you know, entertainment and learning. You
Well,
know,
one thing that I catch myself asking people around town when I'm interviewing them is about whether they see something along the lines of like New Haven's music scene taking a sort of next step in some way. You know, that there's the idea of like there's a couple new venues opening up, there's new concert series, and you wonder to what extent that goes hand in hand with like all of the development going on around the city. You know, like people
Correct.
putting up apartment buildings and all of that sort of thing, and like whether the city's on the verge of like some sort of like next stage,
right.
next stage, and like what is that next stage going to
What
look
is it
like?
going to be?
You know, because some of these things feel very like it's not a gamble in the sense of like who knows what's going to happen,
Right.
but it's like somebody thinks, well, the future is going to look a little bit like this, and I want to be there for it.
Right.
I want to be providing something that I think more people are going to want to see.
Right.
And if this is part of what New Haven's future looks like, it sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
You know.
I was, you know, I don't even want to use the word impressed. I mean, it's exciting to see something new. I mean, this is
Yeah.
what we do. So when I hear about a new place opening, it's like, yes, another place to go, another opportunity to see
Right.
more. It's just more,
Yes.
you know. But I am impressed because I got to, you know, again, if you read the interview, you know, what they have planned sounds so exciting.
Yeah.
You know, and
Right.
you know, Los is a cool I place, I saw it basically being framed, so I didn't see it completed,
Mhm.
but the space looks great, and him and Slate took this place that exists, and they're just giving it a facelift basically.
Right.
So it's the idea, you know, when people talk. The other thing I've heard, you know, again, because I kind of came late to the party here in New Haven, but I had been in New Haven as a teenager, is you hear people say, you know, that they don't, you know, they want there to, you know, things to remain that were there.
Yeah.
You know, some people fear change, some people are dying for change, and then you have everywhere in between. Something like the State House takes something that existed and updates it.
Right. I
You
mean,
know?
not unlike what College Street did a couple of years ago,
Correct.
where that's an old theater that was sitting there for a long time, and
Right.
somebody put a lot of money into it. That would be Keith Mahler, promoter Keith Mahler, put
Right.
a lot of money into it, and took a gamble on it, and that's another one that seems to be working out quite nicely. As far as we can tell, like
Right. I saw Squeeze there, which was
Mhm.
after the last show that we did. We
Right.
did this show like the end of November
Mhm.
or the last roundup there, and I saw Squeeze the beginning of December, who
Yeah.
are one of my favorite bands ever, and I had seen live in the 80s at like
Right.
Lake Compounds. And I saw him there, and it was
Yeah.
it was phenomenal.
And
It
then
was
how
phenomenal.
how large was the crowd for that?
Oh, packed.
Yeah.
Packed. And,
Right.
you know, I wanted to stand up and dance, of course. And I stood up a little bit, and then I was like, nobody's standing up. And then one of them was like, you know, you can get up and dance for this one. And I'm like, hell yeah. And I stood up and
Right.
started dancing. And then, like, the the last couple songs, people started going down to the front, so I just ran down to the front because there were seats set up. So
Yeah.
sometimes they don't have seats. Like when I saw
Yes.
the Decemberists, when I saw Miracle Legion and Guided by Voices, there were no seats.
Right.
So we stood up front, we stood wherever. So there you have that option, and that's going to be at the State House too, actually. So again, there
Nice.
may be times where they have chairs, and most of it is going to be standing room only.
Right.
You know, standing that Lo said, and they might have some dance stuff and DJ stuff, and I'm all for that too because
Yeah. Oh yeah, for
you
sure.
gotta dance, you
Yes.
gotta move. I do anyway. I don't know anybody else, but that's part of what I'm here for.
No, absolutely.
This
So-
is what I did Sunday night. So we're talking about last shows I went to. I was dancing Sunday night at Cafe 9 for Brendan's new show, which is the DJ.
So let's play a little. So I'm gonna play a song of Earth Cries called "Philosophy." Do you remember them playing this one? It's okay if you don't. I'm just curious.
I honestly, off the top of my head, I don't. They were just,
Yes.
they're so good. Anything you choose is going to be great.
And then and then one by New Mokhtar. Now he has an interesting discography for what it's worth. People who are intrigued by this guy. He actually doesn't have a lot of recordings that sound like his live band does. There's a lot of there are a lot of kind of experiments, which I think is actually really cool. But I found the one that sounds as similar as I could find to what his live band sounds
He was
like.
also in that Prince Purple Rain version, like they did almost like a Purple Rain type of movie that he starred in.
And now this happens to be
Is it
like
from
that's yeah.
Awesome,
The soundtrack
yes.
is what he sounds
Great.
like live, which is convenient.
There you go. See,
Yes, exactly.
we work so well together.
Yeah. All right, so here goes. was Madhu Mokhtar.
That was
Yes. I had my little pause of going like, that was nice. That was nice.
It was nice.
That's what that was. And you're listening to Northern Remedy, the show dedicated to New Haven's music, past, present, and future. I'm your host, Brian Slattery. I'm the arts editor of the New Haven Independent. And with me here is Karen Ponzio, arts reporter for the New Haven Independent. And the two of us run around town, seeing a lot of shows. And we decided halfway through the year that we would talk about the ones that left an impression on us for one reason or another. So we've talked a lot about how, some of the shows sort of emerge out of New Haven's music community, and some of them are the result of a lot of sort of excellent coordination between the New Haven music community and bands from pretty far away, as far from all over the world who come here to play and find a willing and excited audience to hear what they're doing, which is part of what makes this an interesting music scene, and I think has to but I think really does have an effect on the local music scene itself. Like it gets a lot of influx of new ideas from abroad. It's not just people listening to each other, though it is that too. So I think to round out this show, though, we can bring it back to the locally level, because we're going to talk about two shows that happened at Cafe 9, right, which is a very long running club now, and it has been owned now by Paul Mayer for going on 15 years, which is a heck of a run for a club owner. There aren't too many people who do it for as long as he's been doing it, and it tells you something about the place, that it's managed to sort of like keep up with the times that way. Like it doesn't feel like a dinosaur. It doesn't feel like, it feels like it has a foot in the past and is also like keeping up pretty nicely. So talk about the show. Talk about the Shilpa Ray show. Who opened for Shilpa Ray?
Henry Flower.
Oh, right.
Who is
right,
Dave? Dave. So that's Dave is from New Haven. Who lived in New Haven, now lives in Brooklyn. And the band is Henry Flower, and I reviewed them last year. They opened with Ellison Jackson, and so this year he was coming in with Shilpa Ray, and there were people there. Again, another thing like I talked about with the Irascibles, where people came in who are friends with him,
right,
to see him and come to see him and love him, and he's a great guy, and the music is very ethereal and lyrically beautiful and musically beautiful. Really great opening set, and he has some new music out. And then Shilpa Ray came up with her band, and she just...
They are based out of New York.
They are also based out of New York, and there were people there to see her, to see them, and she's there, and she's on her keyboard, and she's kneeling on her keyboard, and she's on an harmonium, and she's
now the harmonium is actually a big part of that band's sound, which is kind of cool.
And I was like, is that a harmonium? I think I might even have texted you. I'm like, is this a harmonium?
Yes.
Like,
for people who don't know what a harmonium is, because it's it's not an instrument you see very often. It's basically like a pump organ, which means that you have to it's gonna look like a keyboard, but then it has like some sort of like actual air pump. And the air pump is what generates the sound, and it could be like that you do it with your hand. Depends on the model of the harmonium, but it could be that you need to do it with your hand while you play with the other hand, and it could be that you do it with your feet. But either way, you have to like pump air into it to make it make the sound. But so the sound ends up being a little bit uneven in this very cool way that a lot of people like, and if you get good at it, you can make it uneven in a rhythmic way, which is what which is kind of where the magic is that then you're kind of you're holding down rhythm at the same time that you are playing whatever it is that you're playing on the instrument, and you can use the airflow to be really expressive with it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like I'm going to be super basic here, like an accordion on its side.
Yes, right.
I'm not as eloquent as Brian with the musical instrument.
It's so hard to describe a harmonium.
But I was like, is that a harmonium? And so the thing is that, again, she's going from, there's a full band, but the Cafe 9 stage is a small stage.
Yes.
And so when you get more than 4 people up there,
Yeah, it's pretty
which
crowded.
there was. And then here you have her with a keyboard, with the harmonium. You know, she's got the cowbell. She came down off the stage onto the floor to sing in front of everybody. And again, people were there singing along with her. So there were people there who were there for that band,
Right.
for this. And I didn't know, I had no familiarity with them, but man, was that, and they just went at it. And it was another one of those nights where I got like super, I wouldn't say super carried away with like dancing like the other ones I've described, but it was another one of those times. There was also earlier in the year, there was another two-piece band that Witch Hair opened for called Lola Pistola, who's also from Brooklyn. And I just said to Brian before the show started, Shilpa Ray and Lola Pistola are playing together some shows, and I like saw that online and like almost like lost my mind. I was like, wow, these are like two of the best people I've seen at Cafe 9. And then once I thought that to myself, I was thinking like, wow, Cafe 9 really is so good at this. Paul just brings in these people, these bands and these acts that are, if you haven't heard them before, even if they're not necessarily world, traveling acts, if they're,
Right.
From Brooklyn or from, wherever they're from, brings in these acts that you can go to and discover somebody,
Yeah.
That maybe you can go into New York to see,
Yes.
or they have all their CDs there and they hang out after and you talk to them and you get to know them, and and they're really good at that. And but this band, man, did she really impressed me. The whole band did. They were so good. It was so good. It was like Patti Smith-esque at times.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it was also just that like really like kind of dirty, awesome rock and roll. Like, yeah.
Yes. Right.
And again, it was like a Tuesday or a Wednesday. It was like, and again, that's Cafe
Right.
9. There's music every night.
Yeah.
So you can have they have the Manic Monday show.
Right.
So every Monday there's 2 or 3 acts there that are, and they've been having some great ones of those.
Mhm.
Those have been fun. We've both reported on, we could go on and on about those.
Yeah, definitely.
Just since they started this or even just 2018.
Yeah.
But that Shilpa Ray show, man, again, I'm like, is this like a Wednesday or Tuesday? How lucky are we?
That is one of the, again, as a music fan, that is one of the things that I like about living here, is that I'm a big fan of seeing big bands in small spaces.
and
so there are quite a few places like that here where, it's a sort of like roughly, 75 to 100 seat capacity. Or even 200 is still pretty small, like as far as the venue goes. It's not 2,000.
right.
And there's a pretty steady flow of those acts. That if when they're in New York, they're going to play a much bigger place that's more expensive, and when they play in Boston, they're going to play a much bigger place that's more expensive. And when they're here, they're playing like a 75 seat place.
Right.
And you get to like get up nice and close, and you get to see what they're doing, and you get to really hear what they're producing. And I don't know, that's a nice treat.
Yeah.
Like there's like Firehouse 12 is guilty of that a lot. Bringing.
I still have not been to Firehouse 12. I have
Yeah.
to say I have to get there this year. I
Like
have not been there.
Like I was describing it when somebody I know who lives up near Vermont is a big Bill Frisell fan. He's one of those like top of the game jazz guitar players. And he goes, I hear Bill Frisell is playing in New Haven. And I said, yeah. And he goes, where's he playing? I said, Firehouse 12. He goes, what's that place like? I was like, well, it's this really nice room, and it's like a 75 seat place, tops.
Mhm.
And he's like, what? He's like, Bill Frisell's gonna play there? I'm like, yeah. And I was like, it's gonna be great. And I was like, you can be sitting like 4 feet from that guy if you show up early, and you can really, see what he's doing. And he thought like, that's amazing. I said, and I had that appreciation all over again for like, it is pretty amazing.
Well, Robin Hitchcock this
Yes.
year, and I reported on that, and that was, and not only was he at Cafe 9, which is small, but he
Right.
played the Sunday Buzz, which is a 4:00 show on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Liz Galorn opened. She was great. She played solo. Of course, Liz is always great. but Robin, and, and she was thrilled to be opening for Robin Hitchcock, who was one of her favorites.
He's like a big deal.
And then there he is, and it's like he's like kept saying, the sun's still out, and I'm here, and we're gonna, and the sun's going, and he's this great storyteller. He's this kind of legendary indie guy, and it was phenomenal. And it's like even last year, I'm like Marshall Crenshaw. I'm like I'm standing next to the stage next to Marshall Crenshaw.
Yeah, that's cool.
And the place was packed.
Right.
Robin Hitchcock, the place was packed.
Right.
But they're there. They're on the corner of State Street.
Yeah.
And Crown, and you're there, and you're like, wow.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's and Cafe 9 does it, and there's there's other like Three Sheets has a small room. I went to a show there last week. The bands. I've done some metal shows there and punk shows there. They have a lot of that stuff there, and you have 3 performers on stage, 2 on the floor. Everybody's crowded up to them. You're trying to get your video, and you're trying to not get killed. And I'm trying to not get killed. Excuse me. I won't speak for anybody else. I'm trying to not get killed, but and I'm here, so it's worked. But yeah, they have these small stages, and they do what they can with them, and it's great. It's a different experience.
Right.
It's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
But it's still an experience. And they're both really good at it, and Cafe 9's doing it every single night.
Yeah. I actually can't believe that I forgot to mention the Mark Rebo show. There was a similar thing.
Which one?
Mark Rebo. He's this he's for guitar. He's like maybe one of the better guitar players alive.
Oh wait, that's right. That wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
Okay,
no,
now I remember.
It was just like maybe 2 months. I can't even remember now. Not that long ago. But it was the same idea where you go this guy plays. He'll go to Europe and play like a giant jazz festival for thousands of people, and then here he is on the stage of Cafe 9 with a bunch of that was a room full of other guitar players.
Yeah, well,
who were very
Madhu
quiet
Mokhtar
and
was like that as well, and so was Loris White. Was
no, absolutely
was drummers and guitar players,
and so it should be
on a Monday night for free.
Yeah.
At Cafe 9, and you're there, and you're like, what?
Yes.
Come on.
No, it's great. It's totally great. So we should end on a somber note, but it's worth one of the things that makes it makes this show memorable. There's a lot of actually just about everything makes this a memorable, and show is not quite the right word for it. But Stacey Phillips, who is a real sort of anchor of the music scene in a couple of different ways, suffered a heart attack not long ago and died in between gigs, going from one gig to another. And this was obviously completely unexpected. And he had a gig at Cafe 9 that was scheduled for the Sunday after he died. And that, not surprisingly, that gig turned into a long and very loving memorial service for him. That began quite appropriately with prayers and a fair amount of religious observance, which was really nice. And then because Stacey Phillips is the sort of person he was, it became very funny very quickly because as one person pointed out, Stacey himself would have been mortified to to see that all these people had shown up for him.
That was fun to read that.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
he was he was a man with a very quick wit, and he was not particularly sentimental as a person. He was very much about sort of what was going on around him. And as several people pointed out, they would just feel like Stacey would hate this.
So
but of course, it was all very necessary for everybody in the room, and a lot of really great stories were shared about Stacey Phillips. My favorite one being how he got the stage name Stacey Phillips. His real name is Melvin Marshall, and which is actually a great stage name, as somebody would point out. But so the reason why he's called Stacey Phillips is because his sister told us this story, and she said that at one point he was playing a gig, and on a lark, the other band members introduced him as Stacey Phillips, heir to the Phillips Milk of Magnesia fortune. And sure enough, the next day there was a write-up in the Village Voice about the band, and it mentioned him as Stacey Phillips, heir to the Phillips Milk of Magnesia fortune, and he just ran with it and didn't look back. And that's in some ways that's very like telling of who he is as a person. You know, he's like, I'm rolling with this.
He went with it.
Yeah.
Let's get to the music, right?
Yes. But so this sort of generally celebratory atmosphere got very intense because the last time he played was with the Afro-Semitic Experience, which was with a band that he'd played with for quite a long time. And they knew like basically the last like 2 songs that he played before, and then he suffered his heart attack like an hour later. So they performed those 2 songs, and they performed the heck out of them. It was a really it was a very, very powerful moment. I imagine it was very cathartic for them and very meaningful for everybody else. And I don't have recordings of those particular songs, but it seems more appropriate to go out on Stacey Phillips himself, because he was a marvelous dobro player.
Yeah.
He was part of a compilation that won a Grammy, you know, in no small part because of his own playing. Something he was very sort of self-effacing about, and you know, I think the quote was, you know, what's it like to win a Grammy? He's like, I guess it's better than not winning a Grammy.
I'm sure he's not wrong.
But you know, he did not make a big deal about it. He would probably be the last person to tell you that had happened. You know, it was just something that had happened in the course of his career, and you know, he'd done plenty of things before and plenty of things afterward. And
well, again, talking, you know, when we were talking about, you know, walking the walk before, it's like that's
he
was leaving a gig when
Yes.
it happened. You know, when this whatever happened to him happened,
Totally.
and you know, he played constantly.
He was a real
Constantly.
walker.
Oof.
I mean, for personally, like the way that I played with him most, because we played the same instrument, I don't think we ever did a gig together, because why would somebody hire 2 fiddle players? They don't need to do that. But we saw each other socially like all the time.
Right.
And when I was learning how to play jazz on the violin, he was one of the people that I chased around for about a year, like at various jam sessions and such. And there was a point where he was playing something that like completely left me in the dust. It was awesome. Like he just like took off.
I love that.
He just like,
this is awesome.
yeah,
Left
he
me in the
just
dust.
took off. Like he played the melody and it was great. And I was like, what is this song? I love it. And then the improvisations were great. Everything was great. But like I had nothing to contribute to this, right? Nothing. And the thing went on for maybe like 7 minutes, and finally the song stops, and he looks at me and he's just like, yeah, sorry. But now when I play that, but the thing is, like, I went home and I was like, I gotta learn that thing, and I did. And every time I play it, I think about how much I stole from him. It's like
You're carrying it on.
Yes, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that way around here. So
if you get nothing else from this 2-hour show today, please remember the phrase "hunted them down." Please play more shows. Where is your music? Brian and especially Brian and I are working really hard to get the music that you don't get to hear that often or heard more.
Yes. So that was
we
that.
are persistent.
Yes. So. Yes, so we're going to go out on Shilpa Ray doing a song called Pop Song for Euthanasia, of all things.
She's so great.
Yes. And then we'll go out with the Afro-Semitic Experience playing a song called Yizkor for Martyrs. And the reason I picked it is because his dobro playing is particularly nice. And it seems like a great way to end this.
Cool.
Karen, this has been so fun.
Oh, this is thank you for having me. I mean, we
totally.
always have a fun time when we talk anyway, but I mean, this is fun to share this with everybody and hopefully get people excited about what's out there, because but wait, there's more. There is so much more coming up. There is so many people coming out with records, and there are so many good shows coming up. We talked about the State House being new, the Rough Draft is new.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lineups for every venue in town are just stacked. So,
yeah. No, it's
festival season. As we also talked about, so
it's a fun time to be a music fan.
Pay attention, New Haven. We got more news for you.
All right, this has been Northern Remedy on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting from New Haven, Connecticut.